Bonjour et bienvenue à une spéciale édition de WeAreDevelopers Live. Nous avons un invité de France, Christophe Portneuve. Christophe, oui,
Hey,
ça va?
I did not expect you to go in French on this. Mais
French
peut-être qu'il faudrait que je parle en français. Or I should speak English like this, perhaps, so people can immediately peg me as French.
That'd be lovely. Yeah. So Christophe and me are friends for a long, long time. We met at Paris Web, which is
2006.
here, and then we met at .js as well, where you're the MC, and .css, I think, as well.
And .css, we might have met at .css, but Una Kovetz used to be the MC.
Okay, yeah. So he's basically in France, and he's right now giving a training today. What are you training people on?
Actually, yeah, it's an internal training on like having a correct React mental model, which is something that far too few React developers possess. And we have like this gigantic legacy React code base that needs some serious TLC. So I'm going through all the 300 plus React devs so that we can start again on a good grounding.
What, you got like 300 people in the course?
No. In the course, yeah, but this is across like 15 sessions.
Okay.
So usually I got 25 people tops in a session.
Yeah, because I always thought like with trainings, like 10 to 15 people is the best number, because before over that you don't have
7
time
is awesome, and I used to cap at 10 at my previous company, but right now it would just take forever. So we're doing basically 3 feature teams at a time, and that's anywhere from I would say 15 to 21 people, I guess.
Not bad. Yeah. And I mean, this is a lunch break session. We are Developers Live, so we thought we'd get a French person in so we can use a 3 to 4 hour, sometimes 7-hour lunch break, depending if we go on strike in between or not.
Or if you work in like show business or
yeah. We just had a chat before that about the talent in France and like engineering and how engineering works in France. And I found it amazing how much talent we had in older companies that I worked in, like Yahoo. We had a Grenoble office. That was amazing. The people in Mozilla in Paris were incredible. Our office
office in Paris was incredible.
It's like we had an office in Montmartre. We weren't allowed to put anything on the walls because everything was a listed building. Like I don't even know how much it cost, but it was mental. It was like being in Amélie.
It was gorgeous. This is where I ran all the Node School Paris chapters for 2 years in that huge room.
That was it was really fascinating, and I wonder why it did. Why we can get rid of? Oh well, it was money. That was the main.
It was money for sure.
But yeah, it was great because also living in London, I just could take the Eurostar over, and it was just very easy to go from center of town to center of town in like 45 minutes of 1 hour. And
well, especially if you go from Paris to British because of the time zone, it's like 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. You got the extra hour. I always wonder about like there's you leave England and then there's like these 15 meters and then there's the French border guard. And of course, also like basically going through it and not anything. But I'm also like, what if somebody has a heart attack in between those two? Like, what's happening then?
International waters.
Yeah, it's a bit like that Terminal, the movie with that person that was stuck at that airport for like
Tom
years.
Hanks. The Polish guy.
Yeah, so that was really weird. So then, I thought we're not going to do it in the whole of French because that's basically that's cruel and
showing me up to be a typical Brit, who only just about speaks English. So respect to both of you. I mean, Chris, I never even knew you could speak French.
Wir können auch das auf Deutsch sprechen.
Oh, we can do that too.
Oh no! Oh no!
You can also make up random language and make them even look worse. Like you're just
Japanese, maybe.
Which actually brings me to the first topic that I wanted to cover today, because we have these link resources that people can play with as well and can do with it. And this is basically a video that went viral that I found really interesting. It was we don't need noise for it, sound for it. Actually. It's basically 2 AIs talking to each other, pretending to be human, and then one of them is actually recognizing the other one as an AI agent, as he legally had to say that he's an AI agent or something like that. And then they switch to the to just sounds and start talking in a much faster way and getting to the solution much faster. So now,
honestly, it doesn't feel faster at all. It doesn't feel faster at all. Usually, when you look at the modulation they're using, and I think they're intentionally slowing this down. But when you look at the modulation they're using and you look at what they're saying, It almost takes a bit longer with the modulation. It's just that it's a lot easier to recognize because the analysis of the discrete tones, basically, which is like a high-speed discrete tone frequency, is a lot easier and a lot less heavy on the AI side. You don't need like speech recognition. It's a lot less costly. But it didn't feel faster. You can totally speed that up for sure. But in that specific video, I was like, wow, it's not even faster.
Well, I guess that is also a matter of like showing it. And I love that in the resource, in the README, it says like, oh, this is viral. Please don't get too excited about it and look at the source code and play with it yourself. But I find that this is a really interesting thing because it points to the waste that is, to me, AI right now. We make machines pretend to be human and then to convert that back to machine thing. Like, you know, this use case was booking a hotel room. So it could have been a select room from rooms where date is this and that in a SQL statement. But instead, we went through like humans communicating with each other over voice or generated humans. And I also like the idea that an AI agent recognizes another AI agent and then goes into like computation mode rather than just pretending human mode.
Yeah.
Is this how it works?
Yeah, that's what it does. The switch to that frequency tone based protocol called Gibberlink, the GG wave format, and it's a lot easier to just pick out frequency based representation of numeric values that then map to specific to letters or whatever you, than to do speech recognition, which is enormously costly and has latency, right? So it certainly consumes a lot less resources on both ends, both in terms of avoiding speech synthesis, because frequency tone synthesis is like trivial, and same on the other way around. You just like doing that frequency analysis on the waveform is actually super fast and doesn't need any third-party data center running some speech recognition. So it's a lot less resource intensive, and you could probably speed that up to a certain level where the fast Fourier analysis becomes muddy because it's too fast. But yeah.
It feels like going back to the 80s when we had like
modems, you know, like
yeah, or audio tapes where we actually recorded software as audio,
for sure,
and then you were able to just copy the tape and bring it back. So it feels like we're getting into that space again. But it's a very interesting repo, and I found the inside of it that two AI agents. Because we all get super excited about that. I just put it on social media where everybody's like, where I said like 1997, you had to build a website. Then you actually had to build an app. Then you had to build a bot for a chat system like Cortana and Siri. And now everybody has to build their AI agent. And we always sell this like package of software to people as the billable thing, but in essence, like what is the purpose of your project? What are you doing for end users? The format to me is less interesting than this, but we always get bogged down and like everybody has to do an AI agent now.
Yeah, and I think at some point it's like we sort of like lost sight of what the parties were, right? Because those AI agents are essentially there to bridge, to basically save on customer service, if at all, by like having human input and automating the handling of that, or the other way around, right? We have stuff that is done by the machine and it does human output, so speech synthesis. And we forgot that before we did any of that, we had already done APIs and standardized APIs and mashups and standardized class. And so technically, we already had mashups of various APIs automatically plugging into each other, grabbing that information, making a data lake out of it at the machine level. We've done that ever since Web 2.0. And so when those two machines realized their machines, instead of going to Gibberlink, they could just like go, oh, what's your API endpoint? What are the standardized data, schema, JSON schemas, and let's go, just like make regular API calls together instead of going through all that process. I think we sort of like lost sight that, hey, if there are machines that can just keep talking together the way machines used to do, instead of like still using that voice bridge.
It's a bit like when we sent links to each other instead, and then we used search machines to Google and others to actually websites. Like that kind of felt like an extra level in between because of the scale of the amount of things. Sure. Oh, by the way, I mean I have this thing here to actually say cool or say like next, so we can edit it later on much better. And I just put that on the magazine, how I've written that one. And as we got you as a French person today, I gave an extra one that actually I thought would be beneficial to actually have as well. So
which one would it be?
the shrugging one.
Oh,
basically.
I never remember what's the name for that class of emojis. You know, like
ASCII
like
emoji.
I think there's like a specific name from Japan for the specific combinations. I'm not sure, but ASCII emoji is fine with me. But yeah.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, that was fun to build, and it just shows like how far CSS and JavaScript has come, because it's very simple to build these kind of things these days. So you're working for Dr. Lib right now, which I found interesting, because it's an app that you download on your phone, and then it tells you all the doctor appointments that are not available in the next few months in your
So
country.
that's item 1. That's the original DNA of what it is, and that's what it's mostly in Germany right now until this summer. And then this summer we're going to roll out a lot more of what we do in Germany.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because we just now, I was amazed that we now have digital cards for our insurance company. So when you get when you have to get medication, you get that on the card rather than having to print out and bring it out there. Because
Yep.
I think doctors' offices and airports are the only places where I still heard like dot matrix printers.
Mhm.
But luckily,
or faxes for that matter, because Germany, right? Germany is like the one holdout country for faxes. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. During COVID, it was actually a legal requirement to send like information about like vaccinations and stuff to each other with fax, and that was just like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, you know, whenever I don't really get like incoming like spam calls, you know, where people ask me to where they can fax me stuff. But when they did, I used to say, I'm sorry, I can't get faxes where I live. And then they would invariably say, where do you live? And I go, in 2022, you know, but yeah, faxes, plus they're so forgery ready. You know, it's so easy to forge stuff on faxes. I'm just always, it's like checks, like paying by check. You're like, are you serious? It's like
Well, it always cracked me up that like signatures on paper are like a legal thing. And I mean, you see like movies when at the credits you see like the signatures of celebrities and these kind of things.
Yeah.
I know I have a lot of blind friends who are born blind, and they're like, "What does his signature look like?" And he's like, I got no idea."
Yeah.
This seems like a very weird thing to validate yourself, so it's odd.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird, that notion that I know like my kids are at that age where they start having to sign in their name stuff, and they're still like they're 6 and 9, but and it's actually kind of troublesome explaining to them what a signature is, what it should, because it's personal. They should come up with it. It should be reasonably non-reproducible and stuff. And it's the concept is almost alien to them, you know.
Now, let's talk about some code stuff. There was a big post here on simplifying nested code, and people get like super excited about making sure that you return early, or you don't nest in several levels.
Yeah.
What is your stand on that, like in terms of maintenance, in terms of understandability?
Yeah, I'm honestly I've seen in my career really like two schools, you know. There's sort of like the Douglas Crockford school of, except for me, all of you are morons and should write basic code, and that is very wary of early returns. So any short circuit, really, they're wary of breaks and returns and throws and continue. Personally, I really don't like code that is unnecessarily nested. Just like I don't like people putting an else after a return, you know. So I think early returns are kind of cool, especially now that we have all the I do mostly JavaScript and TypeScript these days, and we have all the sort of the safeguards in the tooling that go like, oh, you have like inconsistent returns, or all the usual pitfalls are usually statically checked against now when you do early returns and stuff. So it's far less of a foot gun than it used to be, and I think it definitely helps. If it helps me not having like extra else or extra nested ifs, or I think it actually reads better, because you can like sort of focus on that early set of conditions. You know that you're still there, so you can like get that away from your mental space and focus on the next step of the scenario. I think it reads better. It can probably be abused There's the infamous switch while combo inherited from C. I'm not entirely sure it's legal in JavaScript, but it can be abused. But I do recommend, including in specific React patterns, I do recommend people to short circuit when they can, use continue and break. And at Doctolib, the other main language is Ruby, and Ruby is like the king of short circuits, where it not only has continue, but it actually has like redo, retry, and next, that with all different kind of semantics. And that's kind of powerful when you have those tunings. Like any powerful tuning can be abused, but I think used properly, it definitely helps maintainability and readability for sure.
Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Christophe just said, really. I mean, and especially there's a part in there where it says about sort of that it in some ways represents your thinking when you see these really kind of messy nested, and that it's like a Frankenstein kind of function. Someone's just kept adding to it and adding new edge cases, putting them at the bottom. So then it, and it says in there, run them at the top. Just as you said, Christophe, you can put them out of your mind is kind of the key thing. And I think it's an interesting one where it does sort of show with an if statement very much how we connect the code to how we're thinking. And I find that if statements are nearly always the ones that become these really messy, trying to cope with everything. And there's usually a much simpler way if you took a step back. I was also just glad to see there were no ternary operators in there, because that's something that I saw.
Nested ternaries.
Oh, wow. I mean, talking about scrambled thinking, that is mind-blowing that someone would like reach for that and stick with it and keep working on it, when to me, I would say, okay, this is completely unreadable. You've got to take a different approach, So I was at least glad to see that they weren't in there.
There's actually one way to pretty print nested ternary that sort of makes sense, as long as it's left associative, which is the case in every reasonable language except PHP. PHP is actually the one language that is right associative on nested ternaries, and mayhem ensues basically when you nest ternaries in PHP. But
well, I mean, in Perl as well. I mean, then there's also the double bracket operator to say like assign this or that. Then you got the conditional assignments in JavaScript right now, the question mark dot. So that's another thing, which of course, if you know regular expressions, you got the dot question mark, which is like completely messing with your head if you see the two different ones. What I find fascinating.
This operator.
Yeah, what I find interesting here, because there's another big discussion which I'm going to have in a newsletter on Friday about like clean code versus code philosophy, whatever the other bit was. But having tons of returns rather than like nesting feels violating clean code as well, right?
I don't really know. I don't really know what my answer should be for this. I think there's a lot of sort of guru sect-like, almost like cult-like effect around Martins. And whenever I read an article by Martin, it really feels out of touch with actual real-world code most of the time. And I think that people don't really take what he says with a grain of salt, or actually just take it really to the letter. And I think like caring about having like a clean, well-reasoned code architecture and general software design is definitely super important. But a lot of what Martin prescribes seems to me like it's going way too far and actually actively gets in the way of maintainable, like real-world, day-to-day maintainable code. It's also very OOP oriented, and I'm a lot more of a functional programming guy. And I find that basing my code mostly on like neat, well-scoped pure functions is often like a lot easier and a lot simpler than basing it on a neat, clean object architecture for a lot of use cases. I'm going to drive a lot of hate from our Java fans and for this, but
I thought you're the TDD guy, right? Like TDD's world kind of thing.
Thing is with TDD that nickname actually predates the TDD practice, and it stands for something else. But the advent of TDD ruins my Google page rank. but yeah, I'm big on test driven for sure, and which is one of the reasons I like functional programming and pure functions, because they're like trivial to test and optimize. But
One thing I find interesting is that the switch statement kind of fell out of grace. Like a lot of people that learned coding later on don't actually use switch statements at all. I learned just
why?
randomly from Douglas Crockford that there's a finally in switch as well, which I didn't know existed. Like, so Dan,
Yeah.
what's your thing? Do you do if else, or are you going for a switch, or are you going for a directory lookup? Is another option of doing it, of course.
Yeah, no, I think I remember there was a period going back to ternaries actually where I loved them, and I thought, oh yeah, this looks so nice and so clean. And I think that was what enticed me in. But now I tend to go for if statements because it's that linking in with how I think. But I actually do use switch statements quite a lot, to be honest, as well. I think when they fell out, I think they're for me they're very readable as well. It's about just not having this very cloudy way of thinking, and that when I'm finding something's getting quite nested in that if statement, then I probably go for the switch statement because it feels like I can clean out how I'm thinking. It's a very strange thing to have to try and sort of express what it is that's going on in your mind and why you're choosing something. But yeah, I'd say that's about the reason why. But ternaries, no, get in the bin. I avoid them wherever I can.
CSS custom functions. I didn't quite look too much into it because I'm kind of getting overwhelmed by CSS nowadays. I love what CSS can do, but all the we have mathematical functions in CSS
Oh,
now.
it's an OS by now. It's an OS.
You what?
It is an OS at this point. Like this, the CSS engine has always been one of the most amazingly optimized parts of browsers. It's just incredible how much work it can pull in milliseconds. But when we started having stuff like Houdini and everything that came from that, including custom function and all that, we just opened, I don't want to say Pandora's box because it's not inherently evil at all, but the game changer was at that point where we say that, hey, you can have some custom logic pop up in the CSS engine, and be it for implementing properties or custom functions or all that. And I'm just amazed at what just even native CSS, without even custom stuff like view transitions and all that. I'm just amazed at what it can do these days. And we keep reinventing the wheel with costly JS instead of using those. but yeah, CSS is absolutely incredible. I'm utterly surprised to see custom functions finally coming into their own. Because for me, since Houdini came up, and it's over 10 years ago, it was always written on the wall that such a thing would happen. So
it felt weird because CSS to me was like a firewall for complexity of rendering. Like I didn't have to understand how the browser renders things. I didn't have to understand how graphics hardware works. But then with Houdini, we gave us full access to the rendering flow. And I guess it was part of the web. We want access to everything. We don't want magic. We want things we want to code things on the metal itself. But that felt that it can overwhelm people that want to learn CSS right now. So Dan, what do you think about custom functions? Is this something that probably will, in 3 years when people forgot about React, people will start using it? Or is it something that is a game changer, as Bramos says here right now?
I think it can be a game changer if we can get through the kind of noise, because I think when I first saw this, it feels like there's this strange meeting in the middle between JavaScript and CSS, and that they are not trampling on each other's toes, but there's ways that you'll do something, or you'll get used to doing something with JavaScript when, as you said, Christophe, there's usually a CSS approach that's actually going to be a lot more straightforward. But it's whether or not the CSS approach is kind of the done thing, or if it's popular or not, because I'm finding that these kind of peripheral things within CSS, the more advanced features, they don't really get picked up by the average person. So then we actually fall into bad practices that I actually wrote an article yesterday about the popover API, for example. So not strictly CSS, but the same sort of principle that we're finding these workarounds with frameworks that we get used to. And then it doesn't really matter what's happening with the CSS. People ignore it because they say, well, I've got this bad practice, this way of doing it. And so I just wonder and worry if it's going to be something like that, even though the example, which is a light dark mode switch and, serving different styles, I think most developers would say, oh, okay, that's actually a really good use case where I can kind of start to pick this up and use it. I just hope that is what happens, because I think, and I'm being really honest here, I think as somebody who is very framework heavy, I've definitely become aware that I've fallen into these really bad habits where the framework can make something very simple for you and you're ignoring the thing that's actually the bedrock of the browser or whatever it is you're using. So yeah, I hope I'm going to play with this when this when this is kind of bedded in a little bit, and there's a few more articles out around there, because it does say this isn't available yet. So I am definitely going to use CSS functions. I think there's something to it. It's just whether there's enough noise about them. Is it the CSS isn't sexy anymore? Is it that to developers they want the JavaScript alternative? I don't know what the reason is, but.
Well, I guess it's the same with like animations. When we had CSS animation and transitions for quite a while now, but everybody's using GSAP to actually have more control over things, or whatever the equivalents in Vite or React or whatever are. I think one thing that is interesting is that the adoption cycle has become much faster, because we don't even wait for Firefox and Safari anymore. But it's like, it seems like the Chrome team releases something like that and people see it as like, okay, that's a given then. I wonder if it is, but it's, I mean, as it's CSS, and one of the features that I hope never breaks in CSS is that CSS basically, if it's not understood, it gets skipped. It doesn't throw errors like JavaScript does. So that's one benefit of all this functionality. Like if you put it in right now, it doesn't do anything, but as soon as the browser understands it, then it will do the thing. So that's more of a architectural thinking when I'm going to use that thing, rather than like I just need to use it because it's there. This was really bizarre. Extreme server-side rendering, which sounds like an XSS, like a security thing. But what they actually do is basically stream the HTML and bit by bit, rather than just like in one go. And it goes directly into the latency and like how much per computation it needs and what's going on there. It's an interesting idea. And when you think about it, the LLMs, like the streaming of the text, I always thought this was actually a design decision, but it's actually the functionality of it. We had a talk about that one of the live days last year, where somebody showed that the system is just showing you chunks back and you live render them, which I always thought was an accessibility issue, because as a screen reader user I would not get that information and that kind of stuff. But the whole idea of HTML as a streaming model is interesting, because if you think about it, games went that direction quite some time ago as well. You don't download the whole binary and run the thing. You just see the game as an interactive movie to a degree, and it makes you wonder if that's an interesting thing as well. And I have to give a shout out for that logo up top right. That's just beautiful work.
Yeah.
So I mean. So streaming bits, do you think that's something we should be thinking more about, or is it more of a like let's keep HTML the way it is right now?
I mean, I don't have a huge amount to say on it. It was an interesting one. I think the last few lines of the article, he almost says, yeah, it's not really practical, if I'm honest with you, but it was an interesting thing to play around with. So I thought, yeah, I'm not sure really about what that's going to mean to the sort of average user. I think maybe there's it's a bit of an exploration into like a totally different way of thinking about the web and how it could function. And like you're saying, some of this marrying up with other industries and seeing what they're doing. But it feels like everything's far too, gone past that point, right? I'm not sure. But what do you think, Christophe? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, it will feel like a mental experiment for me. So the whole idea of actually streaming server-side is something we see in the React world, right? We do have streaming SSR. That is definitely how you get content the fastest, and how you can have, when you do it right, because personally I'm not a Next fan. I think Next keeps tripping upon their own problems from the version prior, and reinventing the wheel and ignoring the platform, unlike Remix. But the streaming SSR is definitely a way that is kind of popular, even if it's not the dominant one in the React world. It's really good from the user's perspective, but you still send some JavaScript, right? You still send some divs. There's still a client runtime that does some stuff. What he's suggesting in that article is really about like really twisting the semantics of a lot of stuff. So it feels more like a thought experiment and a fun, hackish way of doing things. I don't see that as being super performant. It certainly doesn't really scale, because it means you're fully stateful per HTTP connection on one single client. You have to maintain the entire state system for it. Client side, you can't really multiplex like you would on streaming SSR the usual way. it sort of feels a bit like rediscovering the wheel, though. Like we do know that even plain HTML, we've known for decades that streaming it instead of waiting for the server to complete the entire page computation and send it gives better results, which is why he says it works in old stuff. It works in Firefox. It works without JavaScript. Yes, streaming HTML has worked for decades, right? It's just that most of our frameworks don't do it that way. They compute the entire thing and then they send it. And whether it's streamed or not because of the packet size is another matter. But so it's a cool thought experiment. It's like the guys doing like ASCII-based MP4 encoders over Telnet, and you can watch all of Star Wars over a Telnet connection. It's cool. It's a very nice and fun hack, but that's not what you would like to do, in the end, either for watching Star Wars or opening a Telnet connection. So I don't expect like a lot of innovation going out of this particular path.
I remember 1997, I saw like an online chat system that wasn't a Java applet, and I was wondering how the hell they did that. And what they did was just generate an animated GIF and keep sending. When you typed something in, they generated another frame and never sent the end sequence of the GIF. And that way you had like a chat in the page that looked, but like after 5 minutes, it was a memory overflow and the whole thing crashed. But it was also a very clever way to tell the browser never to stop loading that image. So yeah, there's interesting things to still be playing with. GitHub has this debugging code with GitHub Copilot. And this seems to be a thing that I've seen in like several articles lately, that we now have like the Claudes and the cursors and all these things now helping you with debugging code, not only with writing code. It feels like linting on steroids by burning a lot of energy, doesn't it?
I'm becoming like an old reactionary guy when it comes to code-related AI. In my experience, there's the whole crap in, crap out kind of thing, especially for generating code. I think for explaining code, to a degree, it works. When you go into like business logic intensive kind of code, by definition, you won't have enough context unless you have like stellar comments all over your code about business notions and concepts that it might try to intuit. But most of it is still analysis, sort of like an LLM kind of level, and so it doesn't reason per se. It can explain some sort of like API related or code structure related to like fresh developers. It won't be able to tell you that for some deep business reason that code doesn't make sense. Same thing for generating. I've talked to a lot of our developers use like a specific instance of Copilot that is fenced, IT fenced amount of code base and everything for a lot of obvious security reasons, medical, healthcare, software kind of thing. And the problem is our code base is full of like a 13-year massive hires, ship it in a rush kind of legacy code base. And so we have a lot, just like Stack Overflow, we have a lot more volume of anti-patterns than clean code. And that's what it learns on. And so it's a lot more likely to come up with one of the most dominant options for what you need, which happens to be poor quality, than the few instances of high quality that we have in our code base for this. And so unless, just like for those explanations, unless the person receiving them has enough baggage to actually take a step back, think about it, see whether it actually seems legit, both for code generation or for code explanations, I worry that this is like a debt generator on steroids or bug generator on steroids. And maybe we'll have like a massive step change in the quality of code-specific analysis in AI. Right now, what I see in everybody using AI, be it Copilot or anything else, at least for generating code, I haven't really seen about explaining. And yes, you have like the generated comment for this, right? Where it's getting better, but what I see is a lot more subpar code coming in, technical debt coming in, and because it wasn't even actually written by someone, nobody owns it, and it's harder to debug because nobody can explain it because they wrote it, right? And it might very well change, and I might eat back those words 5 years from now, it just improves exponentially, right? All of these. But in the current state, based on what I've seen, I'm utterly unconvinced. And I end up not really using Copilot. The one Copilot use case that I used, I learned from you actually a number of years ago, was like the Copilot chat for docs, which was entirely sourced on reputable stuff like web dev, MDN, and so on. And so I knew that it did save me a few keystrokes, a few seconds of looking up the original docs. And at least what it said was far less extrapolatory or hallucination based, because it sourced only high quality stuff. But otherwise, I remain, and perhaps that makes me old, I remain like a high skeptic of AI in code for now, at the current stage of what I'm seeing.
And it feels like debugging is the thing that we have left as developers. Like most of the code will be generated in the future that everybody says like, so it feels like the debugging step, giving that to AI, that means like the AI has written something bad that you have to debug or you don't understand. So it feels like, why are we even in this equation any longer?
And AI is not code owning it, right? So AI is not accountable for it.
Just to jump on the back of that, Chris, it also makes that stage of debugging like very implicit. It makes it just part of, I'm writing code and I'm going back to the LLM saying it's wrong. And now I've got code that I think is okay. Therefore, I've debugged and it's fine. And it's almost made it such an implicit step. One thing I do like from that article, just to very quickly point it out, was the fact that they do set some sort of simple good practices, that it's like use the / command, and then it will in some ways kind of focus in the Copilot to know that it's a fix, or you need to write a test, and it sort of closes a few doors, I suppose is how I'm looking at it. Closes the door in the AI's mind of what it's trying to do. It's like you're just trying to write a test. So there's something, but yeah, good points as well, Christophe.
Pasting files into the browser, I like that just because people don't do it. I hate that like there's an inconsistency between different social networks when it comes to pasting an image in. Like LinkedIn, you always have to save it on your hard drive and then upload it to LinkedIn, and in others you can just copy and paste it in there. So I think this is just a good
even in
Slack.
In Slack, I can't just paste an image that I have in a clipboard. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. So this is a really good article just in detail to show you how you can do that in your own apps in JavaScript. And I think it's a very important usability feature for people out there. People copy and paste. So actually give them a chance to paste into your stuff, not like find a random upload button and then have to click save first like you have in things like Atlassian, which is not fun at all. Somebody on a flea market in the Netherlands bought a hard drive for like €5 or something. And it had like 500 gigabyte of like people's medical records,
unciphered. Yeah. This was like one particular medical practice, probably just like like sold their hard drive or didn't wipe their hard drive, and they had the data in full clear text on their laptop. Well, on their regular desktop, most likely, but yeah, I'm actually utterly unsurprised by this. I think this will happen at a lot of medical practice when they ditch their computers, which is why it always drives me crazy when people go at Dr. Ibo, any of our competitors, and go like, but the data, the sensitivity, because and I'm like, yes, storing data with us is like multiple orders of magnitude more secure than what your practitioner currently does. so which is just like laying out there on paper in an office that can be readily broken into, or just on a hard drive, totally unciphered and encrypted, that's going to end up at a flea market. so yeah, I'm utterly unsurprised, and this is mad. There should be like clear regulations on this. Again, we have a lot of full generations of doctors going on retirement, and they're not digitally literate enough to do that kind of technical hygiene, right? Of wiping sensitive data of your stuff, and or maybe the poor guy just like had a heart attack or something, and his practice hardware was just sold off or auctioned off or whatever. We don't know.
Or it could be that the hard drive wasn't readable on that machine, but it was perfectly readable on another machine, and he thought like the thing was just broken. That would be the other thing. Like,
there's a lot of reasons,
Yeah, but I love that attitude, especially from European companies, when they're like, we don't trust the cloud, but we totally trust that laptop without a password. Like this is like always fascinating to me as well. Like we want to be on-prem, but we don't actually do any security about that as well at all. So this is something I found interesting as well, and Dan, that might be something down your alley as well, because this is basically showing how a lot of like data that we see are using charts that actually using the wrong kind of chart, and then basically it gives an alternative what the proper one should be that doesn't give you information that feels skewed. Do I get that right?
Yeah, pretty much. And I've always kind of really liked, I know it sounds a strange sentence, I've really liked looking at graphs, but I do. And there's I actually posted one this morning. There's a website, if you Google it, it's called Spurious Correlations, and it's showing two completely unrelated things. It will be such things like every time Nicolas Cage appears in a film, your chances of falling out of your bedroom window increase. So it's totally unrelated things that you can just correlate on a map. And I had posted one the other day, and it's, again, being a bit ironic because I had 6 subscribers to a newsletter, and the graph showed this flat line and then this huge, exponential growth. And I posted it and said something like, "Numbers are for nerds. Check out that graph, mate." Now, the whole point was, there's loads of people that are doing that, and they are posting these graphs every day, whether it be their MRR or just some element of their quantified life, where they've got, here's all my numbers, and they're quite often when you look at them, you say that's not actually what you think it is, or you could have shown that in a different way. So yeah, I really like this. And I think there are some, just to sort of go on a bit of a tangent there, I think it's ShadCN, I think it was, that released this big sort of chart library, and they've made it sort of very simple for people to add charts to dashboards and things like this. And so it might be interesting just for people watching this, if they go and look at those charts and say, does that actually say what I think it says?
Yeah. And you always, when you have to give your KPIs or OKRs, always give percentages and say, like, we had a 400% increase in users. If you got 3 more users, that's actually fine. Just make sure that you do that. But yeah, it's
well,
interesting.
The old websites.
It's interesting
the
how
old
much
websites, when people would say 200% at HTML. Sorry, Chris, just we had a bit of lag. Or 75% CSS. Do you remember people would put those little skills on their portfolios, and you'd think, what does that mean? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it's the LinkedIn skill assessments.
That's it. Yeah. I'm 72% at JavaScript. Like, this just means nothing, but yeah.
I love that this is interactive, so it feels like that, worry dream kind of stuff. I love that people write articles the way you have like clicky things that you can play with. So this is really, really good to spend a lot of time on. So that's fun. Is it still worth blogging in the age of AI? Just a quick question, and I think no, it is still worth blogging, is what he says here. I think so too. I mean, I never stopped. I never cared about the success too much. I mean, yesterday, Dan, there was somebody who posted that you reposted on a social media thing, and he's like, "How do I get to 1,000 followers on Twitter?" And I basically said, like, post good stuff, find people to repost it, and the first thing, don't look at the number of followers that you have, because if you focus on that one, you're not going to write good content. But with AI slop and things being generated, it can feel very frustrating that your great content doesn't show up any longer. So that's a thing that maybe is just like, yeah, I don't want to care about blogging anymore because I can't get found anyways. But I think my main message is, like, keep doing it. I mean, you've done it for years, Christophe, as well. You've done it quite a time as well, Dan. So, and it feels
and also it remains effective over time if you're persistent, especially not necessarily in terms of like high frequency, but in terms of persistent quality. You will build a community, which you can, if that's your goal, like you want to go freelance and do like info products around that community. If you do consistently good stuff, it always pays off. You look at Josh Como.
Yeah. Oh my God.
He's just been posting really high quality stuff for well over a decade. Slowly built very organically his community, became a trusted name in terms of quality and fun explanations. And then it takes a whole year to build his first infomercial, and like the day he opens it, he gets like, I don't know, like 600K or something dollars by and stuff like that, because It's just been stacking the bricks. It's just been doing the work, walking the line year after year, consistently putting out good stuff on his rhythm, sometimes frequent, sometimes bigger pace. But I think some core things, we get more competition, we got AI shadowing us, we got all of this. But if you consistently put good stuff out there, and indeed do not obsess about the numbers, you're still going to be able to capitalize on it one way or another, for sure. So
I think there's also an ownership thing and pride thing. If I've written it myself and it made sense, I'm actually more happy than if I had an AI generated thing that just had put an AI generated image on top and actually
for sure.
send it out there. It just feels like, you know, when your kid paints out a picture of a dog rather than just painting a dog that might resemble a dog but not quite, it's still art, the second one.
Yeah.
The first one is just painting inside lines that have been done for you. So there's an ownership.
Like Scalzi said, it is art. It can't be art. It can't be art to anyone not a parent, and it can't be anything but to anyone that is a parent. So
Now,
yeah, for sure.
Another person that has been around for decades and doing good stuff is actually just wrote that thing that it didn't occur to me. Like Axel Rauschmeier, he was like doing all kind of cool stuff in JavaScript for years and years, and like
Axel,
super,
for sure.
Yeah, came across as like very academic at times, but like, oh my God, he's so detailed. It's wonderful. But I just love this thing here that whenever somebody sends me TypeScript code to debug or like ask me about things, I'm like, okay, so I have to now run the build thing and make it happen and see what it helps. But now that Node supports it, you can use Node -- watch just to have a playground for TypeScript. And that makes it so much easier. And that's a very simple thing to, I mean, I use things like Code Runner in VS Code or things like Wallaby as well that did it for me. So you can highlight parts of the code and just run it. But this is even simpler. You just go to the command line and do Node watch, and then you go from there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually right now in the middle of migrating the Node instances at Docto to the latest 22, so that we can do away with most of the TSX and TSUp and all those things, and just go Node for TypeScript code without having to transpile. And we do a lot of CLI stuff, and we would need to bundle it so that people could just npm install.gg. But if we go, no, everybody's on 22, it just simplifies the entire tool chain a lot. So.
And Dino does WASM now as well, so that's even more short cutting it, so to say. Yeah, we talked about clean code earlier. I think one of the things when people say like clean code will scale to the millions of lines of code, I think the only way I got JavaScript in millions of lines of code to work was with TypeScript and having types and then having the IDE give me the auto-completion and give me the insights into what I need to do if I need to re-architect it. So I think you're right. Like we have these clean people that talk about like how to write proper code that haven't written code in years, that just basically come up with best practices that sound good on paper.
It really feels what we call hors sol in French, which is like when stuff grows, like plants that are grown in hydroponia or something, but out of actual soil. And so that's just a way to say they're completely out of touch with the basic landscape they're supposed to be authorities on. And at some point they're just within their own mind walled garden of perfect purity, but then practicality goes out the window. And in terms of maintenance, you need stuff that you can actually wrangle day in and day out and actually maintain, not in abstract purity, but in the real world, right?
TLDW is basically allowing you to paste a YouTube video and it will analyze it and tell you what the video is about. There's lots of AI stuff that do that for you. It kind of feels weird though, like maybe maybe anybody who has a paste in here, the original creator of the video, should get a message saying like your video was too hard to understand. So it's an interesting idea, but it feels again very wasteful. Like, why was this thing done if a machine is necessary to redo it? But
is it because it was too hard to understand, or more because people just can't be bothered anymore to watch more than the first 10 seconds? It feels really much like that to me. Like, I don't even want to read the freaking transcript or the whole description, And just give me the exact summary and then see whether it's worth my time. I feel these days with Instagram and all that, people's attention span has shrunk well below 10 seconds. And I think a lot of those use cases are actually not, it's too hard. I've watched it and it wasn't clear. It's like, oh, I can't even be bothered to watch it until you sort of prove to me that it's going to be interesting enough.
Well, that's why we changed the format of that WeAreDevelopers Live. That used to be like 1 hour talks, and we saw that the viewing numbers were just pointless. Like nobody watched these things any longer, and it didn't help anybody. It didn't help the audience they were trying to reach, and it didn't help the creators because their videos didn't get watched. But it's interesting that this is a free service because you can do that with almost all the LLMs out there as well, but it could get expensive when you do it. So for now, until they run out of money, it's probably a cool thing if you want to get a video, just like have a summary of it rather than using up all your Claude tokens that you should use for something else. BritCSS is something that we had actually in Yahoo in the office in 2006, written in PHP, where it actually allows you to actually write your JavaScript, your CSS in proper British. So you have a color with OU and you got a center with RE. So that's something that is happening.
And don't we have anything with IZE that becomes ISE or something?
Very good thinking. That's a great point, you know. Yeah, see, I thought, Christophe, you were going to say this.
I'm not sure we have any properties that ends like this, but
no, you're right. Yeah, we'd have to have a look.
Do we just say Z letter dash index, or do we make it very explicit, like ZED dash index? You know, like ZEE dash index.
I call it Z index.
Oh, you call it Z index? Well, yeah, but most of my American friends say Z index.
Yeah, and they're wrong. But
of course they are.
No, but what I loved is that the pull request that I've written was basically saying that it's not important. It should be if you would be so kind. It's always important to be polite about these things.
I'm sure there's a good mashup that can be done with a very British problems Twitter account. You know, like
oh yeah, that's good actually.
Like, sorry, or sorry, not sorry, or I'm so sorry. But
we need sorry everywhere. I think every line should just end with sorry, and we also need to get rid of the hello world. I think it should be how do you do world would be quite nice. So there's a few more. So that's my pull request coming in later on.
I always like that when you got people that when you're in the way of somebody and you both go to the same direction rather than like going away so you can actually cross each other. I always call it the Canadian standoff. It's like sorry after you. Like it was, but yeah, it's fun to play with these kind of things. But I do find myself having debugged my CSS because I wrote color with OU.
Yeah,
and you also know that if I post things online that are basically using initialize with a Z or something, then it will not be me. It will have been AI writing.
Okay.
And
don't get me started about gray with an E versus gray with an A. That are two different colors in CSS.
And in CSS, that there's mid gray is darker than dark gray.
Yeah. Oh my God! In the original color, like the web safe colors, this don't make sense at all. You got a lot of light that is darker than the non-light, and it doesn't make sense at all. But it's actually that spelling thing is actually a thing at Doctor right now, because we are for, like, I guess cultural, I don't know, reasons. The original language, the source language that we use for all the translations is English, but people actually filled in the US spelling, and the first English-speaking country we are likely to open in at some point is the UK. So it's like, you do realize we're going to have to go through all the translations and unbastardized everything, because our English is not their English. You know, it's Franglish half the time in addition. So we have to like really make it clean now.
It's weird though when it comes to music. Like when you listen to Beatles and they use ain't all the time, which is not UK at all. It's American, but it's because it's one syllable less and it actually rhymes better in most of the texts. Like that's why they did it. And I mean, I think as a French person, like Michel, my belle, like that must be the most hurtful thing to ever listen to, because that was just like when they tried to sing French, that was just
actually the entire verse, right, is sont deux mots qui vont très bien ensemble. Honestly, I kind of like that back in the day Even to this day, people will just like pop up some random semi-correct French just because it's classy, right? I kind of like that. We used to be the international language, dudes. You stole that away from us. But
the King of England, I think, or the
you know,
monarchy.
this is England, and your coat of arms and your national motto are in French, and you had French asses on that royalty seat for like 2 centuries. I don't care. We left marks. Dieu est mon roi, honi soit qui mal y pense.
And you, and you had a German queen for a long time, so like.
Yes, we did.
Very true. Very true. And any of the words that British people struggle to say correctly are just words that have been borrowed from French, and you think
we've borrowed stuff like 16 times in sequence across the channel. There's actually like a really good book by Henriette Walters, who's a linguist specialized in like the very close kinship of French and English over the years, and called Honi soit qui mal y pense, and it's fascinating. You've got words like bowl, and she traces it, and that thing went across the channel 6 times or 7 times, and created words in both languages on every iteration, and it's really fascinating.
Oh, I love that.
And the other way around, when Charlemagne made school, started the notion of mandatory school, or at least tried to get like proper schooling in France, and was looking for tutors of clean Latin. He couldn't find any in France. It was all like what we call pig Latin at that point. He had to go to England to find monks that actually spoke clean Latin to bring back to France. So
what do you mean the channel? That's the Gulf of Brittany, isn't it?
It's like the other day, my nephew, who's 30 plus now, he saw I had unearthed a 3.5 inch floppy drive, right? Not floppy really, but like a diskette. Yeah. And one of his younger friends came in and was like, "Oh, you did a 3D printing of the save icon." And I was like, whoa. So no. So it's like the other way around, but to them it makes sense. Like that save icon still is like a disk most of the time.
Yeah.
And nobody ever saw a diskette. You know, so you're like, there's this square thing, and it means save. Okay.
The paste button is even older because that's from Linotype. Like when you basically you wrote the copy, and that's where the pasteboard comes from. So the people will not know what the hell that is anyways. But iconography is a very interesting thing, how it doesn't work from country to country as well. This is an interesting one about physical controls for cars. We can actually not go into it now much, but oh my God, it's just incredible how many of these, how much detail was going into that one.
So like a Nest kind of interface, Nest kind of dial.
I loved the fact that he's even put the like resistance, that as the number increases, you know, the resistance against it kind of increases, so that there's that kind of loads in there about haptic feedback. Yeah, I mean, this is
some really, people actually care about UX.
Yeah. Look at that.
I mean, whenever I go to the airport, I get one of those miles cards that you just basically pay per kilometer, so you never know what you get. You know, and the other day I had an Audi A6, like really, really expensive car and really cool thing. And then I actually didn't want to connect my phone, so I had to use the internal navigation system. And it has this little dial down there where you have to go through the alphabet from A to Z to go to turn it back and forth and click it to select it. So it took me like 40 seconds to just point in airport or even the BER short thing. And it was just like, who builds this? And it has a little touch.
The same people who build UI for ovens.
Yes. Yes, that's so true.
Or washing machines.
Jesus Christ, oven UI, especially in that tactile, nondescript kind of thing we have now. Like, who do they have like a secret meetings in dark cellars with torches and pointy white hats? You know, about ruining everyday lives for people. I don't know.
And you got every microwave meal tells you on which temperature to actually run it, and no microwave has a temperature scale.
That temperature, right? So it was like 900, and you're like, I've got 1,000 and 850. It's like
I got 1 to 7. What do I do now? Like,
yeah,
yeah. SQL Noir is interesting as well because it's actually a text adventure to actually learn SQL.
Oh, I have to send that to my DBAs. They're gonna love it.
That was really fun. I love when people come up with that kind of stuff. So play with that one.
It's like Vim Adventures. Remember that?
Yeah, build your own adventure books and these kind of things as well. Like, yeah. Or the kata things also that Axel Rauschmeier did back then, how to learn ES6. that is also fun. Like when your last name is null, nothing works. There's a person that has null as a family name, and he keeps crashing databases and can't be found because of it, because there was just no filtering for the null uppercase, lowercase. And yeah, it's amazing that this stuff happens.
Poor guy.
And the last bit, I love the bits as well. A sweater for these trying times on Ravelry, which is actually the sweater of the meme of the dog. Like, this is fine.
Ooh.
But you can actually knit it yourself if you want to. And I call it out now. If anybody listening or anybody watching this later on is going to knit that one, I'm going to wear it on stage at the WeAreDevelopers World Congress, because this is cool. It's fun that Ravelry is still going, because at one time Ravelry was the biggest install of Ruby on Rails out there. It was like one of the biggest social, fastest growing networks, which is knitting people. But okay, I guess it is like pixel art on wool.
Yeah, pixel art on wool is actually a thing. I've seen like a lot of people around me recently, like rocking sweaters like this that were knitted and very, very pixel art based. So
wow,
very cool.
Cool.
Wool is warm. Wool is unbeatable. You know, perhaps
Yeah,
at some point we'll wear less jeans and more felt or something, stuff that actually dries fast and is more durable than jeans.
Yeah, I love the. I mean, I bought a few like sweaters from Ireland, like proper wool sweaters, and they're like a tank. It's so much fun to be in those things, and you never get cold, and it's good fun. And they even have like pictures of the sheep that they came from and stuff, so that was quite cool as well to have. But yeah, it's interesting that we're starting to talk about wool right now. So I guess we are at the end of the session. You have to go back to your class soon as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So thanks so much.
In the quintessential undercutting of French cliches, I actually skipped lunch for you guys.
That's amazing. That's really, really good. I also learned that you never eat the middle part of the baguette, because that's where you carry it under the arm, right?
That's actually the first time I hear of it. In a surprising modern touch, most of the time when you buy a baguette, it's actually in a paper thing that actually isolates your sweaty arm from the baguette.
Yeah.
So
When I lived in Stockholm, there was always this, like, they had the French sausage baguette sausage thing, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? And it was basically just like a half baguette with a sausage inside it, and it was like, that was supposedly French. And you're like, okay, that's whatever Swedish people think French is, but they also put like chicken and curry on a pizza, so you never know.
yeah, but we have so much good gastronomy as well, including all the other stuff from the mountains. You know, like tartiflette, raclette, all of these.
Oh God, I remember when I was in the in Grenoble in the Yahoo office, we went for a fondue the night before, and I didn't know that they put like 2 bottles of wine in the fondue, and like you had like a lump of cheese in your stomach, and I was just dead the whole day. Like,
yeah, but it was so good.
It was lovely. Like, yeah, and it was Grenoble. So Grenoble people got up at 5 o'clock, went skiing, and then went to the office and had breakfast, and then started working, and that was just a great.
One of my colleagues actually does that, and I'm super jealous.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we talked earlier about the life and work balance in France being a thing where people think like you have too much life balance, but actually when you're in office, you do work. Yeah. And I found that attitude really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. And you're actually a lot more mentally available to do work when you have that same balance, right? Because it's always surprising to me whenever I pop up and spend a day. Well, it's been a long time, but when I used to pop up and spend days at, like, you know, offices in the Valley or something, and I would see people just like honestly half the day not doing something else or not doing anything, and I was like, I don't know, why are you paid 5 times as more as we are? It doesn't make sense.
When you go to the campuses in Silicon Valley and there's like basketball hoops and there's like gyms and there's everything there, of course it's meant for you.
Everybody goes on the doctor's appointment and company time, and every time someone pops in, everybody goes up and goes to the cafeteria, and I'm like, when do you even work? it's like weird. Anyway, it's been lovely chatting with you guys. I gotta get back to my class.
Great to see you again. And
sure.
Are you going to come to the Congress this year as well?
We are developers. Not this year. We might be sending people. We sent people last year, but I don't think I will. I'm emceeing .js again. I might be at Nordic.js end of the year, but I don't think I'll be at WeAreDevelopers this year.
Shame, but well, good luck with your course, and thanks very much for this. It was great chatting with you as always. We went through a lot of stuff. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that's it for WeAreDevelopers Live today. So yeah, see you next Saturday. The links will be available for you, and the recording is already more or less live. So see you then. Bye-bye.